Let me tell you a story that might seem complicated, but it's really quite straightforward. As always, all you have to do is follow the money. A little over a decade ago, Donald Trump, then just a private businessman, meets with the Prime Minister of Serbia and tells him how much he would like to build a luxury hotel in the Serbian capital of Belgrade. It doesn't happen, but a few years later, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. And President Trump sends a special envoy to help mediate Serbia's peace process with neighboring Kosovo. The guy Trump sends, this guy, named Rick Grenell, doesn't really have any experience in this arena, but he quickly endears himself to the Serbian government by basically siding with them on everything they want. While he's there, Mr. Grenell makes a lot of new friends. He likes to go clubbing with the Serbian Minister of Finance, for instance. Looks fun. And Rick Grenell also tells his new Serbian government friends that they really should consider the idea of an American real estate development in Belgrade. Meanwhile, Trump's son-in-law and the White House advisor, Jared Kushner, is spending time making fast friends with the autocratic de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia. When Kushner leaves the White House, Saudi Arabia dumps $2 billion into Kushner's brand new investment fund. And now the New York Times reports that Rick Grenell and his Serbian friends and Jared Kushner and his Saudi billions are teaming up to finally realize Donald Trump's dream of that luxury hotel development in Belgrade, along with other big real estate projects in the Balkans. According to a draft outline of the Belgrade Agreement obtained by the New York Times, the Serbian government could turn over the land and the entire development to Kushner free of charge, which I happen to think is a very nice thing for a foreign government to do for the Trump family. As Donald Trump locks up the presidential nomination while facing hundreds of millions of dollars in legal judgments against him. Joining us now is the New York Times investigative reporter Eric Lipton, who has been covering these deals. Eric, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. I tried not to have that drip with too much sarcasm, but it's kind of an amazing situation when you pull it all together and see who the characters are involved in this development.
Yeah, we were startled when we learned that, in fact, that this was a project that had first been proposed and considered by, then Trump businessman in 2013. And that, in fact, some representatives of the Trump Organization had traveled to Serbia and looked at the site and met with the prime minister and reported back to Trump. But then the project went nowhere because shortly after that, Trump was running for president and the international deal stopped. But it was really, that was the thing that surprised us, was that this project, its provenance had started all the way back in 2013 at Trump Tower during a meeting with the prime minister of Serbia. And the same prime minister then, was commenting on it today. He's now a member of parliament. He's now the foreign minister. But he was commenting on the same project today and before the parliament and defending the proposal.
Now, I want to be clear in the reporting. Both Kushner and Grenell say that Donald Trump has nothing to do with this.
That's right. I mean, Trump, in fact, financially is not involved with this project at all. And Trump and Grenell and Kushner both assert it was sort of hard for me to accept, but they both assert that they were unaware that Donald Trump had considered this site. And I said to each of them in conversations, I said it's a bit hard to imagine that we're talking about not only the same country, the same city, but the exact same property that you now are proposing to build a hotel, which is, and that's what, Trump had proposed back in 2013. But they do assert that they were unaware that Trump had considered this site for a hotel back in 2013 and 2014.
This, of course, these business interests tied to the Donald Trump family are interesting in this moment in time, because we were just getting news this week that Donald Trump has got until next week, but he's having trouble raising a bond for the fine he has to pay up. So we have a bit more of a picture about Donald Trump's financial situation, in that he cannot, without liquidating something, probably come up with $500 million. Makes the idea of big developments around the world more compelling.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is not a Trump project. This is a Kushner project. And, Kushner has for the last 3 years been gradually building his investment fund investments. And this would be the largest group of investments that he's done so far. There's 2 in Albania and 1 in Serbia. The one in Serbia alone is estimated to be, about $500 million investment. So we're talking more than $1 billion in these three investments. I mean, the thing that struck us when we looked at them is that the projects in both in Serbia and Albania require actions by the governments there to grant them, the right to use federal property. And in Albania, it's a former military site that would be turned into a luxury resort. And in Serbia, it's the former headquarters of the Yugoslavian military, which was bombed by NATO in 1999, has been sitting largely vacant. In both cases, those sites are controlled by the government. So Kushner would require an act of the government to get access to these sites. And, then they know that his father-in-law is running for president, and that just creates some questions about why these actions might be happening.
Now, it's not that Serbia hasn't had anything to say about Donald Trump running for president. In fact, it's been a pretty pro-Trump government.
Yeah, they are supportive. Rick Grenell had a pretty positive relationship with the president and prime minister and other ministers there, and they did work to try to bring some reconciliation between Kosovo and Serbia in 2020, and they had some success in bringing some reconciliation. But Trump is pretty popular in Serbia, much more popular in Serbia than in Kosovo. And so they like him, and they have good working relations, and I think that they've expressed the fact that they would be fine with Trump being the president again. So the challenge here is that Jared asserts that he knows that the spotlight is on him and that he must do everything completely above board, and he's committed to doing that. But the challenge, even like it was when Trump first ran for president, when you have someone who is potentially in the White House and they're getting concessions from foreign governments, it can create an appearance of conflict of an interest, even if it isn't a real conflict, it can create an appearance of one.
Eric, thank you for your reporting on this. We appreciate it. The New York Times investigative reporter Eric Lipton.